should Skyrim have failed? When looking at the individual pieces of the game and the initial underwhelming reception to its announcement, it would be easy to say that, at its best, it should have been an above-average blip on the radar of gamers. But it went on to be one of the most sold video games of all time, exceeding 60 million copies distributed across 9 platforms, if you include Alexa, 3 generations of consoles, and 7 different versions of the game. So, how did we get here? To answer that question, we have to take a trip back in time to December 11th of 2010. The world of gamers are sitting around their televisions eagerly awaiting Spike TV to begin airing their 8th annual Video Game Awards ceremony, hosted by Neil Patrick Harris, gunning down a bunch of unsuspecting dancers.
What the f*** think this is, the Tonys? Hi, I'm Neil. Welcome to Family Hour on Spike.
Definitely an interesting choice. But we're gamers. We're no stranger to cringe performances. A multitude of video games were set to be compared, celebrated, and awarded. But arguably, the thing that most would be eagerly awaiting were the trailers, cinematic and gameplay alike, to establish and build excitement for the titles that were to come. Among them is our first glimpse into what would become one of the titans of our industry, The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. And while I'm sure there were many who would be greatly anticipating the release of this game, myself included, the combined views across Spike TV and the YouTube trailer barely exceeded 1 million. And to this day, the YouTube teaser for Skyrim hasn't even crossed 1 million views. I don't have the exact view numbers of the other trailers at the time of their releases, but looking back at other teaser trailers that were released around the same time, it's pretty clear that Skyrim, while having a dedicated audience, was not capturing the attention of people in the same way that other games were. Fallout New Vegas, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, Call of Duty Black Ops, Red Dead Redemption, all of these titles had a larger reception from their first trailer than Skyrim did. Now, there are more factors than just the numbers that go into how much attention any title garners, such as when the title is announced, where it debuted, the time window since the last major launch from the developers, word of mouth, and how beloved a franchise was prior to the announcement. But even if you try to take all that into consideration and account for the second Skyrim trailer from February of 2011 doing a good deal better than the first, the point still stands. Skyrim didn't have the same hype and attention as many of its peers at the time of its announcement. The other side of this topic is the game itself. Was it really all that good? I mean, don't get me wrong, I played a ton of Skyrim when it came out. I put over 500 hours into a single character profile. But in my opinion, most of Skyrim's systems at launch on their own didn't stand out as revolutionary in any major way. The perk system and progression for the variety of skills was pretty simplistic. The combat was your standard open world spam click the attack button to win. Difficulty scaling wasn't much more than big health bar gets bigger, and the narrative was essentially pouty natives and spy people fight while a big bat tries to end it all. And obviously, while some of this is me being hyperbolic, the point still stands. Skyrim didn't have any major innovations that caused it to stand out. So, what gives? Where did that paradigm shift of interest happen, and what made people fall in love with what is otherwise a slightly better than normal, iterative gaming experience? To address that first part of the question, go back in your mind to April 17th of 2011, the day that the cultural phenomenon of the century made its first step towards the throne of taking the world by storm. Game of Thrones. And if somehow you've been living under a rock for the last decade and a half, and you haven't yet watched the series, here you go. Now that you're all caught up, back to the topic at hand. Despite Game of Thrones being a show tied to a premium network, it still aired to a very impressive 2.2 million viewers for its first episode alone. And while I couldn't find any specific information on this for the first season, it was estimated that during the peak of the show, it was the most legally questionable file shared shows of all time. It was high production quality, a gritty feel to the landscape of the North, tensions between groups for the future of a country torn by scheming, a looming threat bent on wiping out humanity, and a morally complex world where, let's face it, things weren't the safest for the characters that we all loved. But aside from the landscape and political similarities of the North, the Civil War, and dragons, why do I bring the show up? How are these things connected? Well, the first season of Game of Thrones ended on June 19th of 2011, and it had people locked in. The narrative was set, expectations had been subverted, and a stunningly beautiful woman had just magically survived the hatching process of 3 dragons. People wanted more, and Bethesda had the product to scratch that itch. October 24th, 2011, the final trailer for Skyrim launches. And I'll tell you, it was a live-action masterpiece and a work of art. Everything about this trailer synced up perfectly with the atmosphere and the feel that Game of Thrones created. Most notably with the North, which was the region in Game of Thrones that people had a naturally positive association with due to the likable nature of the Starks. The stars were aligned perfectly to catapult this game to a degree of success that every team of developers can only dream of obtaining. And hot damn, did it accomplish that. Over 3.5 million people bought the game in its first 48 hours, 7 million in the first week, and 10 million in the first month. It was meteorically popular in comparison to its predecessor, Oblivion. But we're still left with the problem of the other question. With such a simplistic set of game systems and no major innovations, why was the reception of Skyrim almost universally positive? Ironically enough, it would seem that its simplicity is a major part of what allowed it to shine. Like we talked about earlier, Game of Thrones was the beginning of a renaissance for high fantasy that eclipsed the impact of even Lord of the Rings. People were loving it and they wanted more. Skyrim wasn't only aesthetically similar to Game of Thrones, it was approachable by everyone. It didn't take its audience for granted. Its systems, combat, and story were all easily digestible to a crowd of people who had potentially never played video games before. Leaving behind the more restrictive class-based system from Oblivion opened up a world of possibilities for players to explore and express themselves in a way that they never had before. But I can already see people typing away in the comments saying things like, "You don't know anything about video games. Skyrim was loved by gamers and non-gamers alike. You should totally KYS, you fat." And honestly, fair. Seriously though, those people do have a point, and I've had to wrestle with that for quite a while in the creation process of this video. Simplicity is powerful in game design, but how did Skyrim make it work as well as it obviously did? There's a video I watched in the creation process of this project from another YouTuber by the name of Rasputin called Why Skyrim, only to realize that his breakdown of this topic is so much more thorough than mine, which actually caused me to reconsider finishing this project altogether, but I was deep enough in to see it out. Regardless, in this video, he talks about some of the same stuff that we've addressed here today. He describes the game's relation to Game of Thrones, the popularization of high fantasy, criticism of the in-game systems, and the marketing, along with several other things. And yet, the point that he arrives at is something I found myself agreeing with wholeheartedly. The systems in Skyrim aren't the best in class. They weren't even the shiniest on the market at the time, but they do a brilliant job creating a dynamic experience that creates opportunity for wonderfully cinematic moments while also giving the player time to soak in the environment that you're surrounded by in between them. Skyrim doesn't have the craziest systems in existence, but I think that everything that Skyrim does okay stacks together to create an experience that is greater than the sum of its parts. When Skyrim came out, the gaming industry was at a very different stage of its existence. It had problems like any titan in the entertainment space would, but I think that people were more open to letting games stand on their own merits. Some of that may be rose-tinted glasses on my part, but I'm not so sure that if Skyrim were to have been released today, that people would even like it, much less have it go on to be one of the best-selling games of all time. So, should Skyrim have failed? Maybe. But if you're looking for a more definitive takeaway from this video, I'll leave you with this. As anyone endeavors to create any piece of art, its capacity to be financially successful is determined not only by the quality of the piece itself, but by the perception of the people potentially consuming it. So, in the future, instead of dialing into the discourse surrounding a game, don't. Ignore the cacophony of voices clamoring for your attention. Ignore the banging of the social media drums, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if a game should have failed or not. What matters is whether or not you are motivated to enjoy it. And if you're curious about what it is in video games that keeps you motivated, consider taking a look at this video where we discuss that topic. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.